Mr. President, I thank you for convening this meeting on this important issue today. While registering my delegation's appreciation for the work done by the permanent representatives of Australia and El Salvador as the leaders of the co-chairs of the ad hoc working group on the work of the revitalization of the General Assembly, my delegation would also wish to congratulate Her Excellency, the permanent representative of St. Lucia, and His Excellency, the permanent representative of Romania, for their appointment as the new co-chairs of the ad hoc working group on the revitalization of the work of the General Assembly for the 78th session of the UNGA. While aligning ourselves with the statement delivered by Algeria on behalf of the non-aligned movement, we also wish to deliver these additional remarks. Mr. President, the primacy and legitimacy of the General Assembly flows from the inclusive nature of its membership and the principle of sovereign equality of all its constituents. In these turbulent times, the universal character of the General Assembly and the moral weight of its decisions and opinions cannot be overemphasized. However, as pointed out by the President of the General Assembly when he opened this meeting last week, and I quote, "At a time when questions about the relevance of the UN itself and therefore about its very existence are echoing louder," unquote, there is a growing perception that the General Assembly has gradually lost touch with its foundational responsibilities and has become overwhelmed with processes. Moreover, the attempts to discuss thematic issues in the Security Council has also undermined the role and authority of the General Assembly. Hence, my delegation would like to reiterate that India has consistently advocated the view that General Assembly can be revitalized only when its position as the chief deliberative, policy-making and representative organ of the United Nations is respected both in letter and in spirit. We must admit that some of the blame lies with the General Assembly and its member states for having allowed its relevance to be diluted despite being the collective voice of all nations. The General Assembly should take the lead in setting the global agenda and restoring the centrality of the United Nations in formulating multilateral approaches to resolving transnational issues. This was the role intended for the Assembly in Article 10 of the UN Charter, namely that it discuss any questions or matters within the scope of the present Charter or relating to the powers and functions of any organ provided for in the Charter, that is the Security Council, the Economic and Social Council, the Trusteeship Council, ICJ, as well as the Secretariat, except as provided for in Article 12. Mr. President, for a revitalized General Assembly, which is in tune with the challenges of our times, we need to draw inspiration from the high standards the General Assembly set for itself right at the beginning of its journey. With the passage of time, there have been several occasions when the General Assembly has led from the front while setting a global agenda. For instance, the Sustainable Development Summit in 2015, followed by the adoption of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, and the high-level meeting on universal health coverage, are just a few examples of how the General Assembly can set the global agenda and galvanize the global community for solving common problems and challenges. We hope and expect that same would remain the outcome with regard to the ongoing deliberations with regard to the Summit of the Future, which is to be held next year. We also hope that various streams of our common agenda process will be deliberative in an inclusive manner, and decisions will be taken by consensus to ensure their effective implementation. Towards this end, we continue to call for more effective working methods and better and inclusive engagement among member states during the negotiation processes underway in the General Assembly. Mr. President, while we have made some progress in revitalization of the General Assembly, there is still a long way to go. Taking a leaf out of one of the chapters of the Summit of the Future deliberations, which is aptly called Transforming Global Governance, my delegation feels it would be remiss not to mention that a key tenet of this transformation must be the revitalization of the General Assembly. India believes that multilateralism, rebalancing, fair globalization, and reformed multilateralism cannot be kept in abeyance for long. Nevertheless, as we speak, we see the UN apparatus, especially the Security Council, crumbling under the weight of 21st century geopolitical realities, which consequently has turned some of the tide towards the General Assembly, giving us more face time and traction, where the voice of Global South is a formidable force, unlike what is the case in the Security Council. In this context also, we need a new orientation for reformed multilateralism, which was one of the key priorities during India's Security Council presidency last year in December. We need an all-encompassing, comprehensive reform process, which includes expansion of categories, both permanent as well as non-permanent seats in the Security Council, the question of the veto, the relationship between the General Assembly and the Security Council, and indeed an improvement in the working methods. In the backdrop of the prevailing global scenario, the calls for reformed multilateralism enjoy considerable support amongst UN member states, as we listen to the leadership during the recently concluded high-level week. It does so because of the widespread recognition that the current architecture is anachronistic and indeed ineffective. It is also perceived as deeply unfair, denying entire continents and regions a voice in a forum that deliberates their future. India will continue to be a constructive and active participant in any process that allows for serious negotiation on such critical matters to proceed sincerely. They must not be blocked by procedural tactics. Naysayers cannot be allowed to hold the intergovernmental negotiations process hostage in perpetuity. And it is of paramount importance to ensure that the IGN process that started 14 years ago deliver concrete outcomes through a text-based process within a fixed time frame. Finally, Mr. President, let me reassure you that you can count on my delegation's positive support and participation on revitalization, the work of this August General Assembly. I thank you, Mr. President.